Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I hear hugging is big.
It's big. It's big
It's
here.
a hugging crowd, so
yeah, Edinburgh's all about
we'll
hugs.
be hugging
Later. Lots of huggings last night at the beef party. That's all I can remember. A very warm welcome. Before we start, actually, I've just talked through a long list of incredible work that you've been involved with. Let's take a look at it, some of it on the screen. A huge and impressive body of work. Looking back at your career, you were nominated for an Oscar for Saving Private Ryan, and then quite shortly after that, you kind of made the big jump into kind of television with LAX. Now again, television's very hot right now. Lots of people are putting money into television, but actually back then, that was quite a bold move because most of the money was still on the theatrical side of the business. What attracted you to the first television project, and how did it come about?
You know, there's a great line in Mel Brooks' movie, The Producers. I think it's Zero Mostel, or Gene Wilder says to Zero Mostel, "Do you think he'll do it?" And that Zero Mostel answers, "Only if we ask him." So for me, it was, I got a call from an agent, and he said, you know, you're a successful film producer, you really should be doing television. Have you thought about being in television? And I said, well, I've thought about it, but you know, I've been busy with movies and I don't really know my way around. He said, let me take you to lunch. And he sort of mapped out for me what it might be like starting out in television and how it would work and how many projects. And because for such a long time, and I think it's probably different over here, but in the US there was a real difference between movie people and television people, and the crossover didn't exist. And sure enough, he shared with me how it might be. In the first year, we got no shows on,
right.
No pilots. The second year, we did 2 pilots. LAX, which was the big successful show that was supposed to be a big hit. It had. Well, now I can't remember who was in it. That's how fabulous it was. Heather Locklear and Blair Underwood.
Right.
Wonderful actors, but the show didn't quite work. And then we had this other little show, Grey's Anatomy, and we thought, well, this, you know, maybe this will work. LAX, the big predicted hit, was a disaster, and Grey's went on. And then the next year we did Criminal Minds.
Right.
So I was very, very lucky. You know, I thought, wow, this is easy. You know, you kind of come to Vegas, you win the first time out, and you think it's like that all the time. Of course, it doesn't quite go that way. But
and Grey's first aired in 2005, so that's 17 years old. Is that right?
We're
12 years old.
14th year.
14th year.
Yes.
Which is amazing in its own right that the franchise has been running
very fortunate
that long. And I was reading a recent article about you in Variety, and Shonda Rhimes, who is the writer of that show, is quoted in the article as saying, "I called Mark my dragon whenever I needed a powerful voice to speak for us." So I'd be interested to know how you came to meet Shonda and how that relationship started to work together. You know, what did you see in her at the beginning of her career, and what does she mean by my dragon?
When we first started, Shonda had not written television. I had barely worked in television years before. I had made some children's films for TV. But she was a wonderful writer, and she had a terrific voice. And the first year that we pitched together, we pitched a show about female war correspondents. We almost got a pilot pickup, it didn't work out. The next year we went in and we pitched a number of different things, and I can't remember what they were, but they didn't like any of them.
Right.
And so they said, how about a medical show? You know, we'll try. And we, when I say we, it was really her. She came back with an amazing idea. And of course, there have been, you know, hundreds of medical shows on television over the years, but it was her voice and the characters that she created that made the show so special. As far as being a dragon, she was not as confident and comfortable with the dealing with people who were trying to change the show, and I was very aggressive about protecting her and the show. We had the ABC network tried to fire the pilot director after the third day. There was some problem about they didn't like us shooting through windows. I suggested that they try seeing a John Ford picture.
Right.
It was kind of this like, what are you talking about? And we were covering the show in a standard way as well, but we were trying to make it interesting. The director did a terrific job. And actually, we ended up shooting all of our episodes before the show ever aired. So they were second-guessing us all through the process of shooting. They shut us down once because they didn't like what we were doing. And at that time, she just didn't have as strong a voice as she does now. She had a strong creative voice, but was less comfortable dealing with the network.
Right.
And so doing part of my job was to make sure that they didn't fuck up what she was doing.
Good, and thank God that you did, because again, it's in its 14th year, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to take a quick look at Grace. We watched that yesterday in the technical rehearsal, and we were all welling up. Actually, it's what television's at its best. It's a great piece. Recently, we saw that Shonda's made a move to Netflix. Interesting to get your thoughts on that, and of course your own move away from the kind of ABC umbrella into setting up the Mark Gordon company. Is she following in her dragon's footsteps again?
You know, she's an amazing woman, and it's you know, I'll tell you a quick story. When we were making the pilot, there was myself, Peter Horton. I had made a number of different movies and done a number of television films and was fairly comfortable in the editing room. She had never been in an editing room before. And we saw the editor's first cut, and I started working, and Shonda would say, what if we did the very, you know, low key, what if we did this? Oh, no, that won't work. But let's try it. We tried it. It worked. It happened about 3 or 4 more times. You know, let's put the music with lyrics under the dialogue. Well, you can't do that because it just doesn't work. We tried it. It worked. And I said, I'm going to leave, and you stay here. And she goes, well, you can't leave me here alone. I said, yes, I can. I think we're going to end up with a better show and I had to drag the director out of the, you know, we were old geezers who were thinking about putting Grateful Dead music in the show. You know, it's like, I said, Peter, this was Peter Horton, I said, we do not belong in here right now. This woman has so clearly the right vision for the show. We don't have that. We've developed the script and we've cast it all together and we've done our part, but we need to let her do what she does. So we left, I think, for about 6 hours and came back. And what she had done was so remarkable. And I think what a producer's job is, particularly a non-writing producer, is to make the best show. And if that means sitting in the editing room all day and all night, then that's what you do. If it means walking away because somebody else is more equipped to tell the story better than you can, then that's what you do. And so what I would say is, I'd like to believe that I'm following in her footsteps. I've learned so much from her. I'm sure she believes that she learned lots from me too. And she is just a remarkable human being. She's spending a lot of her time now doing philanthropic endeavors. She's very engaged in the horrible world that we live in the U.S. Politically, and she's trying, as am I, to change the way people see certain things, given the current state of our government. And I think she's really conquered network television. And she had an exclusive deal at ABC. They would buy anything that she brought them for fear of looking like schmucks. Right. So, you know, no one's gonna get a show of hers on CBS or NBC. So I think the Netflix opportunity will give her a chance to broaden her horizons, not have to do 22 to 24. I think we usually were doing 24 episodes on Grey's. It's brutal.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. And with all the shows that she had, it was killing her. And I think that that it's a great opportunity for her. And I think we're going to see some amazing work coming out of her on Netflix.
And I'm very curious about kind of the process of pitching the kind of new players in our space, the Hulus, Netflix, Amazon Primes, Apple announcing their kind of move. You've been in kind of the front line of that transition in the US. Is it different pitching one of the new OTT providers versus trying to pitch a show to a network? And are there things that broadcasters need to learn from the challengers about how the better ways of getting great content on screen?
Yeah, I think that the broadcast networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and I think the CW is considered a network. I consider them a half network. But they're so stuck in their old ways, and people don't really want to work in broadcast television the way they used to 10 years ago. The best writers, the best actors, the best directors are working in cable or SVOD. And I think that the only way that the networks are going to entice the most creative, inventive people to work with them is to change the system. Right now, you're still pitching a show, you get notes up the ass. It's crazy the level of notes that you get on a network show. People don't want to deal with it. I think they need to shake it up so terrifically in ways that they would never think of. Like you say to a creator or a producer, here, develop 3 shows for us, 1 is going on the air. Bet on the talent. You don't have to do 22, you only have to do 18. We're not going to decide that we have a precedent that we're only going to pay an actor this much. They have to do everything because now they're behind. It used to be that everybody else had to catch up. Now they have to catch up, and they're not doing it. And it seems so clear to me and so many other people in our industry that they need to shake it up, and yet for some reason they're stuck. And I think that we're seeing their demise yearly with the percentage drop of ratings points, and at a certain point, it's going to be too late.
Right. Coming to some broadcast networks near us, I think that story is going to. I think the UK is a little bit behind that, but I think it will catch up quite quickly. The next project I want to discuss is Ray Donovan. It's a personal favourite of mine, so it's great to ask you about this. It's now in its 5th season, just launched, I think, last week on Sky Atlantic, 16th of August, and Showtime's its home in the US. Interesting digging into Ray, because I never understood at the time that originally it was a movie project that had landed on your desk.
That's
and
right.
That you decided to develop it as a TV series. Could you tell us a little bit about that decision, kind of why you decided it was better as a long-running show rather than a kind of one-off movie, and kind of just some of that creative process that you kind of went through on that journey?
You know, Ann Bitterman, who wrote this first script and created the show, remarkably talented woman, and she did come in and talk about it as a movie, and it was. I love those kinds of shows, movies, gangsters, private detectives. It's fun, and I had always wanted to do one and never found one that was quite right. And when I heard the pitch, it just felt more like television. The fact is that what interested her was the family and the relationships. And as I heard her talking about it, I realized you couldn't get the depth of character and story in a 2-hour movie. And so I said, well, what about this for television? And she had created Southland, so had worked in television and had won an Emmy years before for NYPD Blue. And she said, well, maybe. I said, well, let's talk about how we can do that. And I will say that it was one of the most satisfying collaborative experiences I've had with a writer. She was so much fun to work with and so open to other ideas of mine and other people's as well, that the experience was one of the best I've ever had. Both with her as a writer and with Showtime and the executives there. Because they don't make a lot of shows, they're very producerial. David Nevins, who runs Showtime, was a producer, so he's very producerial in the way he looks at things. And it was the first show that I had done outside of the broadcast networks, and so to have the time to really cut the first episode, to not start shooting until we felt we had the right script, to not start shooting until we found the right actor to play Ray and John Voight, you know, who's amazing in the show. It's one of the things that makes cable and SVOD so appealing, is that you have time. In network, you know, you're barely finishing an episode, and 2 days later it's on the air, and you're making 22. Right. It's tough.
Yeah.
Really tough.
I think Ray really stands out for its phenomenal casting as well. There is not a single passenger on that screen. Every single actor is doing an amazing job. We've got a clip of Ray's to show you right now. It's actually from the 5th season, actually. So you'll see Susan Sarandon in there. I don't think she's been in episode 1, so you'll be seeing this for the first time. I love the language in it as well. In fact, we don't call it Ray Donovan in our house. We call it fucking Ray, because there's so much swearing in it that we have to be careful when the kids are around.
And Liev is amazing.
She's super.
Really,
he's brilliant. Amazing. So I'd like, if it's okay, to just kind of dig in a little bit deeper into actually what makes you tick. Actually, particularly in kind of 2 areas. How do you must get 100 projects a week coming across your desk. What's that kind of, what process do you go through in terms of choosing those projects, and how do you sense when you think something is going to be special? I mean, what part of you kind of tingles when you kind of see something that you just have to take from black and white into full color?
First of all, most of what one reads isn't very good. So if you start with 80% of what you get, whether I read it or whether someone else in the company reads it, it's easy to say no. The harder part is to say what of the 20% or 10% or whatever it is. I really like to read scripts. You know, a lot of producers I find, or you hear stories that they don't read, which is crazy to me, because I think that whatever success I've achieved has always been about the script first. So packaging is important, and who your relationships are and what the needs of each buyer, whether it's a film or television show, is important. But in the end, you either have a story that people want to see or make, or you don't. And all the icing on the top of the cake is meaningless if you don't have a great story. So I read a lot. I read a lot of movie scripts, I read a lot of television scripts, and when I read something that excites me, it's exciting. I mean, it's great to read a good story, and it's not that things are perfect. You know, one of the things that I share with the executives at our company is, it doesn't presume that it's not perfect, because what do you ever get the first time that's exactly right? But is there something in there? Is it a great story? Is it a great character? Does it feel fresh? Is it a new take on an old genre? Because there are very few stories that if any, that we haven't seen, but can we look at it sideways? Is there a different way of approaching it? And sometimes I get shot down by my own people. We have enough volume now, whereas when I started out as a producer, I read every script, right. I made every decision, because it was me and an assistant, and so everything that we did, I made by hand, and I don't have that luxury anymore to be involved intimately on every single show, on every level. So what I try to do is work with people who who, it's not that we share the same story sensibility as far as what we're interested in, but we share what I believe to be the way to look at a story and to see if it's a well-told story. Mm-hmm. And so I have wonderful executives that I work with who are also producers, and I'm excited about what they're excited about. So there are things that I get personally very invested in. There are things that other people get personally invested in, and we all work together to tell the best version of it. And once we decide it's something that we want to pursue, then, though there may be a dedicated executive who may not be me on that project, everybody is working toward pushing that thing, whatever it is, up the hill, because it's hard to get anything made, no matter who you are, how much success you've had. You're as good as your last script. Right. And do people want to make things with you? Maybe we have a little bit of advantage because we have had some success, but if it's not I get passed on 9 out of 10 times, just like everybody.
Right. Could you talk to us about the recent announcement, setting up the Mark Gordon company, setting up your own studio, which I presume is every media executive's dream come true.
Or nightmare.
Could you talk to us about that a little bit as well? Kind of why now, how that came about, the kind of freedoms that you think that could potentially give you in the future,
I think, you mentioned Shonda Rhimes and why she went to Netflix. As a producer, I have always been entrepreneurial by spirit. I've made independent films. I've financed independent films. I find the spirit of putting your ass on the line exciting and challenging. Mm-hmm. And I spent 10 years making television for ABC. I've spent my entire career making movies for the studios. And it's been fantastic. ABC was so good to me, and I learned how to make television with them. And they taught me a lot, and all the people that I've worked with taught me a lot. And the same on the film side, I've learned an enormous amount. I felt like I wanted a new challenge. It wasn't about money. Right. It wasn't about power. It wasn't because I believed that I was smarter than everybody else. But I did believe that there were other ways of doing things, and in particular in television, I saw that the network business was going down the tubes, and I wanted to have the opportunity to work in all different areas digitally. We're doing a show for YouTube, we're doing shows for Amazon, we've just started a digital division where we're going to be making short form content as well. I wanted to learn new things and have another challenge, new challenges, and so it just seemed like the right situation or the right opportunity. When eOne came along, it's interesting. I had met with a number of different companies, many of whom were here in the UK, and I met Darren Troop, who's the CEO of eOne, and we had dinner. And 12 weeks later, we had a signed contract. It was just this, which is ridiculously quick considering that eOne is a public company. He was generous and gracious, and I believe that what eOne had for me was much of what I didn't know and understand, and at the same time, them respecting my ability to do what I do. And I don't want to say without interfering because it sounds like I'm not interested in their help. I really am, and they're so smart, and they've been amazing partners. So I think like anything in life, when you've done something a certain way for a long time, to have the opportunity to try something different and look at it and employ techniques that you wish you had been able to do in a more traditional system, it's a real joy and a great bit of luck for me to have these guys.
Are the pressures different, or do you feel kind of liberated? And
I feel liberated and pressure at the same time. I've never had to focus on hitting numbers. Right. It was, we'll make as much as we can. everybody gets paid, whatever's left I get to keep. And that was the way it was for forever. Now it's about that horrible word, EBITDA. It's a word that I have used now 1,000 times. You know, in my previous incarnation of work, it didn't exist, and I didn't even know what it meant.
Yes. How accountants speak ever got into our industry, God only knows.
But you know what? Again, it's challenging to have to succeed within the context of your own approach to telling stories. Because in the end, what I know is that the only thing that's ever brought me success is doing good work and believing in the stories that I'm telling, and the stories that the people that work with me want to tell. And so it's different. It's challenging. I think what's been fortunate, and it's nice, is that, you know, right out of the gate we had a successful show with Designated Survivor. So I think everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief. And when you don't have that pressure, I think you do better creative work, and you're willing to take more risks, and you can afford to.
Right.
And so it's been a lucky thing for us to have had Designated be a hit right off the bat.
It's something's obviously working, because, as you said, you've got a huge success on your hands with Designated Survivor. For those of you that have not seen it in the UK, it's on Netflix, but it stars Kiefer Sutherland. He's playing the president of the US and doing a better job than the guy that's actually got the job, I think, from the clips.
It's not hard.
Clips that I've seen. That show's now shooting a second season, literally as we speak.
Yes.
Is my understanding right now. You've got a movie you're working on, Molly's Game, which is released this year. That's starring Jessica Chastain and Idris Elba. You're also working with Disney Pictures on The Nutcracker, and there's Four Realms, starring Keira Knightley and Morgan Freeman. How do you stay across all of that?
We have 40 people at the company. They all work very hard, as do I. And I've had to let go a little bit. It's been difficult. I think most people in the room, if you're producing and you're focusing on what you're doing, are very, very focused on detail. I have had to learn where to come in and where I cannot be there. And it took a while. I really enjoy, I do spend a lot of time in the editing room, both on the films and television shows that we do. Very involved in cutting the pilots. And even the episodes. Once the show is launched, if we have a good showrunner, it makes it easier for me to step away, although I do read the drafts and I do look at cuts and give notes. You know, Designated, we're on our 4th showrunner after the first year. It was very, very difficult. I think we finally found the right man for the job, Keith Eisner.
Right.
And also the company's gotten bigger, so whereas there was no head of current, me and a couple of other executives, we were developing, producing, current, everything.
Right.
We now have more people, and so it gives us the opportunity to do more things. And I really love the idea of, you know, my former assistant, who's only been an executive for 2 or 3 years, is the executive producer of The Nutcracker for Disney.
Wow.
So it was really gratifying for me to see her be able to be there all day long, and I would come back and forth, and I'm very involved with the director in cutting the film, but it's about having people that you trust and allowing them to fail as others have allowed me to fail.
And talk us through a typical day. I mean, with Designated now again filming its second season, I hear rumours that you're in the edit suite quite a lot on that show. What's a typical kind of Mark Gordon day going to be when you get back to LA?
You know, I try to. We have a couple of meetings a week for the different divisions of the company. I find that on Monday mornings from about 9 to noon, I'm able to sit down with the entire department for television, film, and our digital, and then our business affairs, and go through every single project that we have. We have one room one large conference room at the company, which we call the War Room. And on the walls are every single project that we're working on. And there are probably 100 of them in various stages of development, both in film, television, and digital. So
is it locked? Is it kind of like
no, we have a full-time guard there,
exactly.
who, with a gun, and
Kiefer
no one
Sutherland.
can come in. But it's very helpful to me to be able to, on Monday morning, go through every single project and talk about where they are, not just for me to be comfortable about what other people are doing, but for them to be able to say to me, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, and for me to ask them, what can I do to help move this forward?
Right.
And then, after that, it's telephone calls, it's running back and forth to the editing room, whether it's Designated Survivor or in New York where we're cutting The Nutcracker. We're here, sitting with Ken Branagh on Murder on the Orient Express or some of our other shows. It's meetings with writers, which are, for me, the greatest joy.
Right.
To take an hour or two a day and sit with writers or work with people internally on scripts that I've read or treatments that I've read or pitches that we're getting ready to go out with. Being out in the marketplace pitching marketing meetings on shows. What's interesting is I know that I'm probably doing something right in terms of managing my time because my phone sheet is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and that's just about me willing to delegate and letting other people sort of deal with the moment-to-moment work. And sometimes I'm very, 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 very involved in whatever that small thing is because that's where I need to be. And at other times, I may not be engaged except on Monday morning when I hear what's going on and say, do I jump in, or do you need me, or can I help, or how do I
Brilliant.
help us get this thing moving forward?
Mark, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's time for another VT actually. And again, thank you for allowing us to show this, because we're going to show you a exclusive preview from season 2 of the show, which is still, as we said, in production right now. So if we can show the Designated Survivor clip. Brilliant, brilliant. It's great to see that actually. One of the things we were talking about in the green room before we came on was kind of collaboration between US, UK companies. UK producers are interested, should they be more interested in what's going on in the US? And really, is anything that you think from closer collaboration that can be gained that benefits both sides of this? I think we've got this great common language as an advantage in the UK and America, and should we be using that more to make better television?
I think so. It's interesting. You can't make a show or a movie anymore without at least one of your principal actors being British.
Right.
It's
usually the baddie.
We can't get away with them with it. It's you sit in a room and you look at actors, or you talk about the actors that you want, and we're in a situation right now where we're getting ready to tell a very American story, a movie, and the two leads are British. I mean, it happens all the time. And there's so many great British writers, both writers in the theater and in film and writing for television. I'm really interested in making shows over here. There are things, it's a little less so than it used to be because of the proliferation of some of the great stuff that's being done, on Netflix and AMC and some of the other channels. But some of the greatest television ever made has been made here in England, and it's still true. Mm-hmm. And so as a US producer, I'm watching it, and I'd like to make it, and so I'm interested in forging relationships with British producers. And I think that there's an opportunity for British producers who have broad ideas, and I mean, there's so much great material here, whether it's, again, books or theater or just original ideas, and so many great writers, that I think there is an opportunity. And I think, everybody in America loves that accent. We certainly do. And so I think there's opportunity on both sides.
So could we see a Mark Gordon Company office setting up at some point in the UK?
I sure hope so. It's something that I'm thinking about and would like to try and make it happen sooner than later. Because as you know, like anything, it takes a while to learn the players, the people that are making decisions. You know, at the end of the day, we're salesmen. We're all selling things that we believe in. And so what I'm interested in is creating an opportunity here for us with other producers who will help us navigate, and where there can be an exchange back and forth between British ideas coming over to LA and the other way as well.
Yeah, and it is getting much harder to get that financing for individual countries to finance their own large, particularly drama projects.
Everything is international.
Yeah, close collaboration.
Which I think is good.
Yeah.
You know, I think it creates opportunity.
Again, it's using that advantage of language, which is a benefit that a lot of European countries don't have and Asian countries don't have. So, yeah, it makes a huge lot of sense. I've got one final question from me, actually, before we've got some questions on from the audience on the iPad, which hopefully we'll have time to get to. But this is probably the kind of the deeper one. But kind of looking back over your career, your successes over the last 20 odd years, and successes and failures as well. I think everyone.
Plenty of those.
Yeah, everyone with a successful career has got loads of great failure stories as well. What, if you could go back and kind of do it all again, what are the important lessons you think that you'd try and tell yourself? If you could kind of do that time travel thing and sit down with your 25-year-old self and say, you know, Mark, look, watch out for this, and this, and focus on this, and stop worrying about this, and this. Is there anything? There's a lot of young producers a lot of young TV executives in the audience today that are either at the beginning or the middle, or some of them like us at the end of their careers. But is there any advice you'd like to give your younger self?
I think I would have tried. And it's terrible to have to use the word try when you're talking about having fun. But I would have enjoyed the process more. You know, I was so focused on getting what I wanted, which was success in movies and television in Hollywood. And I think you have to have that burning drive in order to get it. But I also think that it was for me, it was unhealthy and it was too much of a focus.
Right.
And I don't know that it isn't better, and certainly, you know, you allow yourself a better quality of life if you're not so focused on that singular thing. So I would say to myself, you know, take it easy and have fun and remember that it's the journey because it's true. I mean, yes, that the prize at the end is great, but your whole life is the journey. And so I would have liked to have understood that and appreciated it more. The other thing that I've found over the years, which is, you know, I think I was telling you in the green room the story. My mother, God rest her soul, she called me once, and you know, I'm sure people get calls from their mothers. I know this woman, and she's got a son, and he's a writer, and would you mind? I said, oh, Ma, you know, it's just this typical, okay, I'll read it. So I read this script, and I loved it. I thought it was great. But I thought to myself, so here is this story. These two people sort of fall in love, but they don't meet until the end on top of the Empire State Building. Who the fuck's gonna watch that? I can't sell it. I'm not gonna do this. So I sat down with the writer, and I said, you know, this is a really good script, and this is a great writing sample for you, but no one's going to make this movie. And of course, Sleepless in Seattle came out, and you know, who was the schmuck? But what I realized was, and it was a great lesson early in my career, which is it doesn't matter what you think someone else is going to think of what you love. Mm-hmm. If you like it, it takes one yes, and there's so many opportunities to get a yes. We just sold a show after 32 tries. Wow. And I really believed in it, and I still believe in it. And I kept going back to, we saw this already. Yeah, but you got to read it again because we changed the comma here and it's better now.
Right.
But I think you just have to say, I believe in this thing, and if I'm not a complete idiot, there will be someone else who sees what I see. So don't ever presume that you need to wonder if you can sell it or not. If you love it, go make it happen. And those are sort of the two things that I will write in the book that I will never write.
Based in Seattle.
Exactly.
That's great advice. Thank you very much for that, Ashley. We've got a couple of questions actually from the audience, which I'll get into as well. I've got a couple here on the iPad. I'll go through these, and if we've got some time, hopefully try and take one or two from the audience. But we'll see how we go on time first. So one of these is. I don't know who it's from actually, but it said in Variety you said you are learning half of your job every day. What's new to learn? It's a good question, by the way.
Well, it is a good question.
Yeah.
I think that the way people are consuming, I hate that word, it sounds so businesslike, watching content is changing. My kids do not watch television. They watch it on their iPad. Frankly, I watch most of my television on the iPad now. I'm so used to laying in bed and just watching the iPad that the idea of turning on the television is somehow a less intimate experience, and it's just me in the room. Sometimes my wife watches with me, we hold hands. It's nice to have an intimate moment, in marriage. And we do, that's a very special time for us. We don't speak to each other, but we hold hands and watch Ray Donovan.
Fight on who's...
It's really...
Fight about who's going to hold the iPad.
It's very special. I try to get the volume up, and she says, you're old and you can't hear anymore, and I go, but I need to hear, and anyway.
Turn the subtitles on.
It's great to be married.
Yeah.
So I think that you can't just say, oh, we'll just take this TV show and we'll stick it on a smaller screen, or we will just take this hour-long show and cut it up into 10-minute pieces. So I'm trying to look. A good story is still a good story, and there's something comforting about the fact that I feel like I'm a plumber in that I know how to fix the pipes and make the water flow, so to speak. But what people want to see, I'm not in the demographic anymore.
Right.
I'm out of that 18 to 49 demographic. And so I'm learning all of the time, both from a technological sort of hardware, how are people watching shows, and also what do they want to watch and what stories do they want to tell. And it's nice to be able to both tell the stories that interest me, like Ray Donovan, but also learn from the 25-year-old assistants or executives in the company what people want to watch and say, well, what's that? And really? And is that something people are interested in? And what's that music you're talking about? I never heard of them. And I sound like an old person, but I am. So that's kind of just staying abreast of what is current in terms of both what people want to see and how they want to see it.
Cool. And then I've got one last question actually here. What do you think about the level of diversity in procedural dramas? Can it be improved?
I think diversity can always be improved as well. We can improve it and improve it. I don't know. I don't think about diversity. It's interesting. Just to go back to Shonda, she was one of the first writers that I read who didn't put, sometimes even gender, let alone color of skin.
Right.
She just wrote it, and we just cast the roles in the most interesting way that we could. I was sharing something earlier today that our company is wildly diverse in terms of gender, in terms of color, in terms of sexual preference. I'm blessed not to think about it in an aggressive way, and we've certainly cast our shows you know, very aggressively in terms of different ethnicities.
Right.
I think that we can always do better. I mean, I think if you look at television, it's still pretty white. It's still pretty white male, but it's changing.
Right.
And if you look at particularly shows on cable where you don't have to, a huge broadcast audience is not required. Yep. You're not thinking about it. As a matter of fact, what I'm mostly finding in our shows is asking myself, where are the white people in our shows? We don't, it's a weird thing, the diversity, at least at ABC where we do a lot of work, is really, really aggressive, and it's great.
Right.
And I think what we've seen, starting with Shonda and so many other shows, that audiences are more colorblind in television than they are in their personal politics. It's really weird. On Quantico, we cast Priyanka Chopra. She's an Indian woman to play, bless you. Bless you. Does anyone have a Kleenex for this person over here? Don't wipe it on your sleeve. All right? We cast an Indian woman, and I was concerned because it's an FBI agent, such a sort of white bread American thing, and she's beautiful. And I was concerned, and I'll give ABC Network and Paul Lee a lot of credit for pushing us and saying, no, give it a try. So I said yes, and I was nervous. But surprisingly, and I say surprisingly, but happily, it worked. I said to Shonda, why do you think the audience was so willing to accept this beautiful woman on this television show? And her response to me was, because she's not white. And the white audience is more willing to accept a person of color in those kinds of roles than they are necessarily a beautiful white person.
Right.
So the interesting thing for me is how in America we have found ourselves, more surprising than not, that there is a huge level of racism in America. Right. And it's depressing and disappointing for so many of us. And yet, if you look at the ethnicity on television, it's broader than one would presume the audience would accept. And so that gives me hope that people will start to recognize that if they can see people of color prevalently on television and in movies, maybe they'll accept them in their day-to-day lives a little bit more so.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Mark. That was a great answer, actually, to a really good question. We are bang on time. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank our sponsors, British Film Commission and Creative Scotland, but I want to send a special thank you to Mark for being so generous with his time, but also with his answers. So please join me in thanking Mark for his patience.
Thank you.
Well done.